of his time if I run over the 22 minutes. I join my Democratic colleagues in expressing my strong opposition to Senator Sessions' nomination. In my view, it's important that every member of this committee fully understands Senator Sessions' views on matters that he stands to influence as Attorney General. So once he was nominated, I spent a good deal of time reviewing the information he submitted, his questionnaire, his supporting documents and materials, and the record of his previous confirmation hearing before the committee back in 1986. I know Senator Sessions. We served together since I joined this body and the committee back in 2009. And while I enjoy a good relationship with him and I respect him as a colleague, Senator Sessions and I have very different views about most of the issues that come before this committee, particularly on matters of equal justice. So when I started reviewing his materials, I paid special attention to how he described his work on civil rights. And I noticed some discrepancies in the way he had described his involvement in civil rights cases filed during his time as a U.S. attorney. I asked Senator Sessions about these discrepancies during his hearing. I asked him about his claim that he had filed 20 or 30 desegregation cases, a claim he made in a 2009 interview with the National Review. In response, Senator Sessions said, quote, "The records do not show that there were 20 or 30 actually filed cases." He said of the claim, quote, "The record does not justify it." I then moved on to question him about 4 cases that he listed on his questionnaire, which asked him to list the, quote, 10 most significant litigated matters he personally handled. Among those 10 cases that he listed on his questionnaire were 3 voting rights cases and a desegregation case. Now, that surprised me. And that's because I know Senator Sessions and I know his record on voting rights. He's no champion of voting rights. He called the Voting Rights Act intrusive and complained about states with a history of discrimination being subject to preclearance. But here he seemed to be trumpeting his personal involvement in 3 voting rights cases and 1 school desegregation case. And I guess it just seemed to me that given his previous experience before this committee, and given the concern the civil rights advocates had expressed about his nomination, that perhaps Senator Sessions or the transition team was attempting to revise some of that history and to recast him as a civil rights champion. And as it turns out, that's exactly what was going on. 3 attorneys who worked on 3 of those 4 cases wrote an op-ed stating that Senator Sessions had no substantive involvement in the cases that he listed as being among the top 10 that he had personally handled during his entire career. And 2 of those attorneys also submitted testimony to that effect. One of them, Jerry Hebert, spent 21 years in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, during time which he litigated cases in Alabama and met Senator Sessions. Mr. Hebert also provided testimony to this committee in 1986, and much of it served as a basis for Republicans on that committee choosing to reject Senator Sessions' nomination to the federal bench. Now, after I questioned Senator Sessions about his claim of personally handling these 4 civil rights cases, Senator Cruz decided to weigh in on my line of questioning. He said that I had intended to undermine the nominee's character and integrity, and that my questioning was, quote, not backed by the facts. Senator Cruz then proceeded to mischaracterize and attack Mr. Hebert, whom he described as, quote, an individual who testified falsely before this committee. Let's talk about that. Back in 1986, Mr. Hebert and his supervisor at DOJ were called to the Hill without advance warning to be deposed. Mr. Hebert's supervisor incorrectly stated that when he was a U.S. attorney, Senator Sessions pressured the FBI to stop a voting rights investigation. Now, that was not the case. It wasn't Senator Sessions who did that. Mr. Hebert's supervisor got it wrong. He misremembered. When committee staff next deposed Mr. Hebert, he was asked whether he observed Senator Sessions interfere with DOJ cases. And Mr. Hebert replied, quote, "I only know what happened in their Conecuh County case, but my supervisor is in a better position to talk about that than I am." Mr. Hebert continued, "He and I both have a very fuzzy recollection about Conecuh County. It was my supervisor's case primarily." Then Senator Biden asked Mr. Hebert about this testimony the next day, and Mr. Hebert repeated the error. But after they testified, which again happened on very short notice, Mr. Hebert and his supervisor returned to DOJ and pulled the records from the case, from those cases. They themselves discovered their error, and they both immediately filed sworn declarations making clear that they were mistaken and that Senator Sessions did not interfere. It was Senator Sessions' predecessor who had interfered. Mr. Hebert and his supervisor did not recant their testimony. They simply corrected their testimony in writing in advance of the committee's vote on Senator Sessions. In Mr. Hebert's case, that meant he submitted a declaration in which he corrected 3 lines of testimony in what was a 24-page deposition, 3 lines. The rest of the testimony in Mr. Hebert's 24-page deposition was unaffected. But just to be safe, just to make sure that the committee didn't misunderstand the purpose of his declaration, Mr. Hebert made it crystal clear. He wrote, quote, "This revelation concerning the non-involvement of Mr. Jefferson Sessions in interfering in any voting rights investigations in the Southern District of Alabama does not affect in any way my other testimony rendered before the Senate Judiciary Committee on March 13th, 1986. Mr. Hebert's supervisor, who was the one responsible for originally getting the facts wrong, also testified in person to correct the record." That's what happened. Those are the facts. But when describing this history, Senator Cruz misrepresented what happened. So I'd like to take this opportunity to set the record straight.
I object to the senator disparaging a fellow member of the committee here in his absence. I would think he'd...
Well, he should be here, first of all. Secondly, he disparaged me, Senator.
To his face.
Let him make his case, and then we'll go back to you.
Sure.
I object to the senator. We're here to talk about the president's nominee, not a colleague. And I object to disparaging...
Don't take this from my time.
...disparaging a colleague on this committee, and particularly in the colleague's absence. It's just not... It's untoward and it's inappropriate, and I object.
Okay.
Can I speak to that?
You can speak to it, but I think that we'd be better off if we just let it go at this point.
You mean let me continue my speech?
Yeah, would you do that, please?
I will, thank you. But just to be safe, just to make sure that... Okay, I did that paragraph. This is what happened. Those are the facts. But when describing this history, Senator Cruz misrepresented what happened. So I'd like to take this opportunity to set the record straight.
I object again. The senator apparently can't get the message from the chairman that this is over the top and inappropriate.
I think the senator from Texas doesn't get the message from the chairman.
You put the chairman in an awful bad position at this point because I'm not sure that I know
where I'm going.
I don't disagree with anything Senator Cornyn said, but I'm not sure I want to rule anybody out of order, but could you please leave personalities out of it?
Can I explain what I'm doing here? Because Senator Cruz did the very thing that Senator Cornyn is accusing me of doing. In my absence, he misrepresented me. He misrepresented Mr. Hebert. He personally went after me. He personally impugned my integrity. You didn't object then, did you?
Okay.
I'm not sure I was here. And I'm not sure
I wasn't
the
here
characterization.
Either.
But
let me continue.
It would be a decent and honorable thing to do it in the senator's presence and not.
Well, get him here, but he'll have a tape of it. Okay. Allow me to read from the hearing transcript. This is Senator Cruz talking to Senator Sessions, and what I'm doing here is I'm clarifying Senator Sessions' record.
Proceed.
Senator Cruz, now earlier in this hearing, Senator Franken engaged you in a discussion that I think was intended to try to undermine your character and integrity.